It has really been a tale of two halves. For the first 3 games, the Seahawks defense was considered elite. I know that they played some less than amazing offenses, but the execution was really sound. They were making tackles, fitting the run really well, and they looked like they were going to be a dominant unit. But for the past 3 weeks, it has been a far cry from all of that. They've been run all over, are missing tackles, and the coverage went from tight to honestly kind of squishy. So what happened? Well, let's start with the biggest story, the run defense. This run defense is currently ranked 20th in the NFL per EPA per play allowed, and that's probably better than you thought it would be, but let's hear what Mike Macdonald has to say on the Mike Macdonald show when he was talking about this run defense.
What you see on tape is too high. I mean, there's high variance, so it's either we're playing it really, really well or it's an explosive.
I could not agree more. This isn't like last year where the Seahawks were getting run over play after play after play. It's really that they're just getting run over 3 or 4 times. As we saw in the 49ers game, that can absolutely still cost you the game, but it's a very different problem than consistently losing. So let's look at how these explosive plays happened. I charted every single run play that this defense allowed for 10 or more yards over the first 6 weeks, and to me there are 2 common threads. The first was 7-man spacing. In my video on Mike Macdonald's run defense, we talked a lot about how 7-man spacing works, and I'm not going to get all the way into the weeds in this video, but what you need to know right now about 7-man spacing is it means that the defense is light in the box. Defending the run from 7-man spacing is very different than defending the run when you have the numbers. In 7-man spacing, you need to be able to play fast, hold up at the point of attack, and slow down the ball carrier. Out of the 17 10-plus yard runs that the Seahawks have surrendered so far this season, 8 of them came in a 7-man spacing look. Let's look at this example. Here against the Giants, it's 1st and 10, and the Seahawks are in a too-high structure. If we switch to this tight camera angle, we can see that the Seahawks are in a 4-2 over front. Witherspoon and the slot receiver are kind of in the run fit, but we're mostly going to focus on the core of this formation. 7-man spacing puts a lot of strain on the front, and here they can't take it. The Giants here are running duo, which is a gap running scheme with 2 double teams right up the middle. These interior players will combo up to the linebackers, and the goal is to get the running back going downhill. I actually think that the interior defensive linemen here do a pretty good job. They're being double teamed, but they're not really getting blown off the ball that much. The second level is really where everything goes wrong. The goal of these players is to work together to attack the space between the big men and cut off the running back. But that is not what happens. This is not how you defend the run. Everyone is closing in on one gap, and that leaves the cutback lane for the running back. I'm not saying that this is easy by any means, and in real time everything is happening very quickly, but this is how you get burned on the ground game. Baker is just playing this too fast. He jumps into a gap before the running back has really committed, and that is what creates this gaping hole. This run goes for 27 yards, and it kickstarts this drive. The other common trend that I've seen is just not setting a good enough edge to the defense. Even if you are in 8-man spacing, which is where you do have the numbers in the ground game, you really do need to contain the ball, and you can't just let it go freely to the outside. Let's watch Derek Hall execute this perfectly. He engages in a powerful stance, and he's able to drive his blocker backwards. Once he's able to get sufficient width and depth, he has really taken away the edge for the running back. After that, he's able to rip back inside and take that gap away as well. This is what you are looking for from your entire defense when they are defending the run. He secures his primary gap by sealing off the edge and then moves into his secondary gap to force a cutback. But here Draymond just doesn't get there. There's no one to the outside of him, but he does not get wide enough or get enough depth into the backfield to force the cutback. The running back sees the open space and he scampers up the sideline for a gain of 19. This is what is leading to these explosive plays. The Seahawks are making fundamental run fit errors, and that is what is surrendering these chunk plays basically for free. These errors are made more evident when they're in a 7-man spacing look, but even in 8-man spacing, the Hawks are simply not fitting the run properly at a high enough clip. From a run defense perspective, I'm not actually as worried as you might think. To me, this is not a personnel issue, particularly once the Hawks get Byron Murphy back in week 6. I do really think that the Hawks have the guys that they need to be a great run defense. And I really don't think this is a scheme problem either. Mike Macdonald is still doing Mike Macdonald things. I love the way that he changes up looks for the offense and he sends blitzes to help stop the run. I really do think that he has been a positive impact on stopping the run from a schematic X's and O's standpoint. But the issue here is execution, particularly from the edge defenders and the linebackers. I think the interior is actually doing a really good job of holding up at the point of attack. It's just everyone around them is not condensing the space enough to get the stop. The pass defense was much of the same. This year in coverage, the Seahawks have been pretty decent, average. They're ranked 15th so far in EPA per pass. But again, there are big fundamental errors, and that is what is surrendering the big plays. Let's look at this one that went for an easy 22 yards against the Giants, and it's just a busted coverage. This coverage is difficult to identify because it is run so poorly. On the outside, we have straight up man coverage, and we have a single high free safety. That is pretty simple, but let's look at what these linebackers are doing. After the run fake, this is where they are, and honestly, they all look lost. There's really two different ways to cover this crossing route from the tight end. If the Seahawks are playing just straight up cover 1, then Dodson would be tasked with taking him across the field. That's not an ideal matchup, but it would probably work. The other way would be if this is some version of match cover 3, where the linebackers are playing zone. Then Rayshawn Jenkins will see this coming across the field and work to pick it up. That would also work just fine. But what doesn't work is what happens here. Literally no one runs with him. Dodson is playing this like it's cover 3 and he's passing the route off. But Jenkins either seems to think that Dodson is running with the tight end or he just doesn't see him at all. I do think that Jenkins was supposed to pick him up, and if I had to bet, I would tell you this is a version of match cover 3, because we can see Baker is pointing for Jenkins to go get over there, but at the end of the day, this is just a bad busted coverage. I don't care how good your scheme is. Busted coverages are how you lose games, and the Seahawks have had more than their fair share of busted coverages. That is something that has to get cleaned up. Let's look at another one. I think you'll all remember this play against the 49ers. This time I'm not even going to try to guess what the coverage is supposed to be here. You could call this poorly run quarters, or you could call this some version of like cover 3 in a way. Whatever it is, it's not being run correctly. The 49ers are running a dig wheel concept. Trey Brown takes the dig, which leaves Julian Love and Boye Mafe to cover the wheel. And again, there's two guys and they both think that the other is covering the route. If Love is supposed to be this high, then Mafe is supposed to be matching this more. There's literally no zone coverage that would allow you to leave this much space. Or if Mafe is right and he's supposed to be zone dropping like this, well then you're in some version of match quarters and Love is playing this like it's cover 2. He'd be about 10 yards too deep. Purdy gives us one of his patented slow motion deep balls, and it really should still be picked, but Love takes a bad angle, and that's just a 76-yard touchdown. Plays like this are back-breaking for a defense because you didn't really make the offense do anything remarkable. You're just giving them points. Before I get into what I think the true biggest problem is with this Seahawks defense, I want to talk about the run defense and the pass coverage together because these problems are similar. It's not that the Hawks are losing on every play, they're losing the games in just a few plays. Let me prove this to you. Against the 49ers, the Seahawks allowed 4 plays over 25 yards. Each of them came on separate drives, and off of those 4 drives, the Niners got 24 points. The Niners also got 10 points off of 2 drives that started deep in the Seahawks territory due to turnovers. And for the rest, when the Seahawks defense wasn't starting backed up and they didn't allow a huge explosive play, those 5 drives netted the 49ers just 3 points. And that's why I'm not really worried about these problems getting fixed. Yes, they are massive problems, but the struggles that this defense is having are fixable. And if you can cut it down to just 1 or 2 critical mistakes instead of 4 or 5, you're going to have a much improved defense. And to be clear, I am not blaming the players here. Often when you hear people talk about execution issues, they automatically blame the players, but to me, this is on the coaches. The scheme is great, and yes, we've seen week after week of Mike Macdonald's scheme working, but the amount of miscommunications is absolutely on the coaching staff. This is not 1 or 2 players busting coverages, this is the entire team, and he needs to tighten it up and make sure that everyone is on the same page every single play. The coaches know that that is absolutely what they're working on, and looking back to how the Ravens started when Mike Macdonald came to town, he's done this before, he has cleaned up these issues before. That's why I'm not really worried about these mistakes getting fixed. It might take time, but these errors are going to become less and less common, and this defense is going to benefit tremendously. But now let's get to what I'm actually worried about. We're going to start with some stats again. Here's a graph of the NFL's time to pressure. This metric measures how quickly pressures get to the quarterback and is a major data point for how effective your pass rush is at affecting the opposing quarterback. Here's the Seahawks through the first 2 weeks. They were above average. That will absolutely work, but for the past 4 games, it's been over 3 seconds. That is by far the worst in the league. I don't even care that Next Gen Stats gave the Seahawks 15 pressures against the 49ers. Yes, these are technically pressures, but I went and charted them, and to me, over half of them are actually bad pass rushes. Let's look at this play. Is it a pressure? Yes, but does it actually show me that the pass rush did a good job? Well, you tell me. Brock Purdy is taking a 7-step drop from under center. Once he hits the top of his drop, he has great space around him. There is really no one pressuring him right now. Because the coverage downfield is pretty good, he steps forward and it looks like he's about to run. Note how the offensive line is still completely holding up. I, again, would not consider him pressured at this point. This is a beautiful pocket. Purdy makes it much worse by stepping up and then running backwards, but he's still able to set his feet and throw the ball. And yeah, he was pressured when he released the ball, but you can't tell me that this was a good pass rush. Purdy wasn't pressured for over 5 seconds, and honestly, he really created the pressure himself. Now, yes, part of the problem is absolutely injuries and the more difficult matchups in these previous weeks. Getting Byron Murphy back and hopefully Uchenna Nwosu at some point, that will absolutely help. Maybe you could even say that Big Cat and Mafe aren't perfectly healthy right now and they're going to play much better soon. But you cannot have an elite defense without a good pass rush, and right now the Seahawks are downright bad. Do I think that's going to change? I honestly don't know. Again, this isn't a scheme thing. The scheme is actually helping, but there's just way too many situations where the Seahawks are not winning their matchups and it's costing them. The edge rotation simply isn't good enough right now, and that is what is allowing these quarterbacks to be so comfortable. I think that the Hawks have the guys in the building to have a good pass rush. Particularly when they're schemed up, we've seen a lot of great plays, but the Seahawks are not going to have an elite defense until this pass rush is at least good. We need to see Mafe and Hall continue to take steps. Draymond needs to start playing well. He's been inconsistent. He's had a couple of good plays, but for the most part, he's been a true non-factor. This edge rotation is simply not getting after the quarterback right now, and that needs to change before this defense can be a really good defense. I still think that there's a chance that this will improve. I'm a huge believer in this coaching staff, and once you get some players back from injury, this could look a lot better soon. But in order for this defense to play up to its potential, we need to see fewer mistakes in the run fits and on the back end, and honestly just a better pass rush. Thank you so much for watching. I know this was a long one, but there's just so much to talk about. If you want to support these types of in-depth film breakdowns and get exclusive monthly videos, please consider joining my Patreon. I really appreciate it, and go Hawks.